best. If we can't have the dialectic leading to the forms, can't have the philosopher king, we'll have the statesman who rules by law. That's about the best we're going to be able to do. Now, here's what Plato thinks of a myth. And Plato's in good form when he thinks of myths. I don't really like the kind of dry, logical stuff like the sophist. The myth that we're offered here in the Statesman is a very fine one. It's the myth of Kronos and Zeus. Turns out that when the universe was first created, of course Plato thinks that it's Ptolemaic, that the earth is the center of the universe, and that there's a big axis mundi, a big line that everything revolves around, because the universe is constantly in motion, a revolutionary motion. It moves around and around. And the demiurge, the creator god, was pushing things around at the first, beginning of everything, and everything worked right. And when things worked right, you'd be surprised how strange things were. When things worked right, everything moved in the opposite direction. The sun rose in the west and set in the east. People would pop out of their graves, and then white-haired old men would become dark-haired young men, and then people would move from adulthood to adolescence back to childhood, and the consequence of that would be that they would eventually pop back into babies and then just disappear altogether. That's the way the world should be. Well, Plato's an old man. He says, I'm at the end of my powers. I'm just starting to figure things out. Now you tell me I have to die? That's no way to run the universe. Clearly, the demiurge, clearly the age of Kronos is over. Now we're in the age of Zeus. In the age of Zeus, everything works wrong. The sun rises in the east, which is ridiculous. It's supposed to rise in the west and set in the east. But no, everything goes backwards now. We live in an age in which God has somehow abandoned us. It's not that he doesn't exist. That would be impious. But he's gone to some special realm. We have a deus abscondita here. The God is gone. And that's what there's been a real devaluation from the age of Kronos to the age of Zeus. And you know what? The philosopher king is a leftover from the age of Kronos, when things worked right, when we had politicians that knew what was going on because they could work with natural language, use dialectic to get to the forms. But now, nothing works right. Old men die instead of getting younger, which is clearly a mistake. The sun rises in the east and sets in the west, which is not the right way to do things. All the planets are moving in the wrong direction. Grass should get shorter, not longer. In other words, nothing works right in the entire cosmos. Why? Because now we've moved to the degenerate age of Zeus instead of the golden age of Kronos. In some ways, it reminds me of Hesiod, looking back towards an earlier golden age. Plato's an old man, and I believe his heart is broken. He hasn't been able to revive the theory of forms or the dialectic, and his entire project is in danger. And that means we have to let the Alcibiades and the Thrasymachus of the world run things, unless he finds a way to stop it. And that's what this dialogue is all about. We finished off the sophist. We allowed him no room to live in ambiguity, and now we're going to create the rule of law under a, if not divine, at least the best of men, the true statesman that rules by law. And here's something to think about. The reason why the projected third dialogue in this trilogy never gets written, the reason why there's no dialogue called The Philosopher, because there's nothing for the philosopher to do. We live in the age of Zeus. If the dialectic doesn't get us to the forms, what's he supposed to do, math?
Yeah. Okay. Let's do Plato. All right? Two logics. I mean it, I don't mean it. Two, right in between. And where is Socrates' position? Right in that space between those two claims. Between meaning it and not meaning it. That is the life of the ironist. That is the life of irony. You live in that space where you mean it and don't mean it at the same time. Who is the great contemporary ironist? Irony pretty much is going by the wayside, right? Because irony is premised on a belief in God. Irony is a deeply religious figure, right? Because irony says, I don't want to commit to this physical world. I believe there's another world. I believe there's a truth. I believe that there's a truth that exceeds this world. I believe that my soul is bigger than my body. I believe that no matter what I say, the truth will always exceed it. But irony says, I still have to live in this world. I still am of this world. And so when I speak, I'll speak so that I am part of this world and at the same time pointing to my exit from this world. I speak as a sensuous being and I point to my own infinitude. I speak as a body, but I point to my soul. I point to mortality. I live in the mortal world, but I point to divinity. Irony is a religious figure. And it is a religious figure premised on that kind of disjuncture between appearances and the real world. Right? That's why it is a Judeo-Christian notion. It's why Nietzsche says Socrates is a Jew. Right? It's why the Jews are the great progenitors of irony. Right? Because, it's why Seinfeld, right? You can never quite get your God. There's always a distance between us. Christianity begins to screw with that with Jesus. Right? Because Jesus is somehow the two melded together perfectly. There's very little irony, is my point today. People think there's irony, but it's actually usually sarcasm, nihilism. Irony is not nihilistic. Irony is nihilistic from one perspective. It's also deeply religious. David Letterman is the last great ironist, I think, that I know of, right? I mean, all these old guys are going down. And when they go down, it'll be replaced with other forms of humor. But not really irony, I don't think. That's my guess. I don't really know what's out there so much. I don't think most of you kids would even recognize irony. Right? Everything's like, you ever watch Conan O'Brien? Did you already talk about his pimp robot? You know what I'm talking about? I haven't watched Conan O'Brien in like 10 years. But he had a pimp robot on. Robot that was a pimp. It was sort of hilarious, right? But that takes two things, pimp and robot, and jams them together, kind of like a surrealist thing, kind of like a cut-up, kind of like a neat chain move. But there's no irony. One doesn't efface the other, right? There's kind of a folding together of these different things. Letterman always kind of poo-poos celebrity, always poo-poos. He has no patience for pretension, the pretensions of celebrity. And the only time he ever gets humbled is, besides New York blowing up, are his athletes. He has great respect for athletes. But always he poo-poos a kind of showing offness. That's why certain people have stayed away from him, like Oprah Winfrey. Right? Because her world can't tolerate irony. Right? It's pure sincerity. I mean what I say. And Letterman never quite means what he says. All right, so what do you think, Lysias? What do you think? That I wouldn't, that this isn't a matter of loftier import, that even the most instant task? What else is strange about that sentence? So first we see Socrates' irony. He means it and he doesn't mean it. What else? What is weird? Yeah. There's a quotation. What's weird about reading quotation marks? Right. And in fact, the only way to know that it's a quotation mark is to see it written down. And Socrates says never to write anything down. That anything written down isn't serious. But here he is in a moment where the only thing he can say can only exist as a written visual text. All right. But I'm saying the moment you see those quotation marks, they're just bizarre. They only exist visually. Right? They're only a visual mark. They can only be written down. So this text is a written text. Right? We know it's a written text because we're reading it. But just in case you think maybe it's supposed to be read aloud, the minute you see quotation marks, how could it be written down? I mean, how can it be spoken aloud? It has to be written down. You can only see quotation marks. I could do this. I could say quotation marks, but that's not in the text. It's also the first time we'll see Socrates speak in someone else's voice. And this will happen throughout the dialogue. Right? That there's a constant kind of ventriloquism that Socrates digs. He'll put his words in other people's mouth. Other people will put words in his mouth. He'll be both dummy and ventriloquist at the same time. And he'll keep swapping positions. Right? So he'll put his hand up Phaedrus, so to speak, and make Phaedrus speak, and Phaedrus put his hand up him. And he'll say, repeatedly, those aren't my words. I didn't say that. You said it, Phaedrus. Even though Socrates is speaking, the end of his speech, he says, I didn't say that. That was your words, Phaedrus. It's bizarre. They're constantly putting words in each other's mouth. It's very erotic. Right? They're literally sticking their hands up each other and making each other speak in each other's language. Right? So this is the first time we'll find Socrates speaking in someone else's voice. At the end of the dialogue, he'll say, the reason I don't like written texts, the written word, is because they're bastards. That's the word he uses, right? They're bastards. They have no parents. They just roll around out there. Once a text is written, it just floats around. Anyone can do anything they want with it. It becomes kind of a moral claim. I mean, it's sort of akin to a prostitute. It just goes wherever it goes. Right? It doesn't have a parent, unlike the spoken word, according to Socrates. So apparently the spoken word is the word that's self-present to itself. It's the word you own. You can be author over your own written words, over your spoken words, but once it's written, you're no longer the author. Does that make some sense? That's Socrates' critique. That when you speak, the words are yours. How can they not be yours? They're coming out of your mouth. You're parent to them. But when you write, you've spawned a bastard. It can go anywhere. It's no longer tethered to you. We'll come back to that. Does that distinction become clear? What's interesting is that Socrates is not speaking in his own words. In fact, he'll very rarely speak in his own words. He will never have been self-present to himself. He will never have been the author of his words, even spoken. So the spoken word becomes akin to the written word. Like in my Duridian moment there for you. Yeah.
You know my circumstances, and you have heard how I think we should arrange things for our mutual benefit. I contend that my request should not be denied simply because I am not among those who love you. Lovers regret the good things they have done for you once their longing ceases. But at no time will someone who is not in love have such regrets. They do their best for you, not under compulsion, but freely, taking into account what is also good for them. But when those who love calculate the harm done to their own interests because of their love, and consider the benefits they have conferred, they conclude that they have sufficiently bestowed rewards on their lover long ago. Those who are not in love have no such complaints, because they have neither neglected their own interest, raised grievances for what they've endured, or quarreled with their relatives because of a lover. Having stripped away all these evils, there's nothing left but freely to devote all their effort to pleasing their lover. Furthermore, if lovers are considered to be valuable because they devote all their attention to the person they love, and if they're willing to be hated by other people for what they say and do in order to please the one they love, then every time they fall in love with someone else, they will care more for the new love than for the previous one, and will be ready to mistreat the old one in order to please the new one. In fact, what sense does it make to turn over such important matters to someone whose condition is so hopeless that even the most experienced person would never try to cure it? Even they admit that they are out of their mind, lack sound judgment, and simply cannot control themselves. When they regain their senses, how could they trust the soundness of the decisions they made in such a state? Also, if you were to select the best lover only from those who love you, your choice would be quite limited. On the other hand, if you drop that requirement, you would have a much larger group from which to pick the one who suits you best. By choosing from so many, you will have a better chance of finding one who is worthy of your friendship. I know you might be worried about what people will think and what will happen to your reputation if word gets around about your relationship. However, you should consider the way lovers act in such circumstances. They're likely to be proud of their success and think that others will envy them, so they will quickly spread the word that their labor was not in vain. They will boast that those who are not under the influence of love can control themselves and choose what is best rather than pander to public opinion. Of course, it is necessary for lovers constantly to be seen together and to make that their chief concern. Everyone will observe them as they talk together and suppose that they are discussing either past or future lovemaking. But nobody thinks such things about those who are not lovers, because everyone must converse with someone. They assume that they are talking as friends, or simply because it's pleasant to do so. You may also fear that it is difficult for friendships to last, and it might occur to you that a breakup in other circumstances would be equally painful to both people. But when you have surrendered what you prize most, it is you who would suffer most. In that case, you should be more afraid of lovers. They're anxious about everything, and they usually think that whatever happens is designed to harm them. For that reason, they prevent their lovers from associating with anyone else, fearing that wealthy people would gain the advantage because of their money, or educated people would surpass them in intellect. They are always on the lookout for anyone who has anything good that they lack, and they will try to persuade you to hate and avoid such people. Soon you will be without any other friends, and if you try to stand up for yourself and display better sense than your lover, you will find that you are constantly quarreling. But those who are not in love with you and have succeeded with you through merit would not be jealous of such companionship. In fact, they would be hostile to people who do not want to associate with you, thinking that they had offended you by ignoring you. So, you're much more likely to increase your friends and decrease your enemies through such a relationship. Many lovers lust after your body long before they get to know your character or become your friend. So, it is hard to know whether they will even want to be your friend after their passion has abated. On the other hand, someone who is not your lover and who has been your friend before the liaison is unlikely to cease being your friend once you have exchanged favors, which will be taken as promises of more to come. You will be a better person if you submit to me rather than to a lover, because lovers will always applaud what you say and do, in part because they fear your wrath, and partly because their judgment is clouded by desire. This is how love manifests itself. When a person is unlucky in love, things appear to be disastrous that do not upset other people. But when things go well, that person raves about things that give no pleasure to others. So, it is clear that lovers should be pitied rather than envied. But if you put your trust in me, I will not count primarily on immediate pleasure, but on future benefits. Because I am not overcome by passion, I am able to control myself and not be enraged by trivial matters. I will be slow to be angered concerning more serious things, and even then only a little. I will pardon wrongs that are done unintentionally and try to prevent voluntary ones. All of this proves that our friendship could last a lifetime. Now, if you still think that a solid friendship cannot be established unless you are in love, you should consider what that would mean about our affection for children, fathers, and mothers. Nor could friends be true who did not act through passion, but through different means. Perhaps you think you should give the most to those who are the most needy, but think about what it would mean to do the same in your other activities. You would seek to benefit not the best people, but those who need the most, thinking that they will appreciate it the most because they will be rescued from the worst circumstances. In that case, you should invite hungry people who beg for food, rather than your friends, to your private banquets. They will adore you and flock to your door, expressing immense gratitude and bless you for the good you have done. Rather than gratifying those who beg for favors, it might be more fitting to benefit those who are most capable of paying you back. Not merely those who are most needy, but those who are most worthy. Not those who simply enjoy the way you look in the prime of life, but who will share good things with you when you grow old. Not to those who, once they succeed with you, will brag about it and ruin your reputation, but will keep it entirely secret. Not those who will be zealous only for a little while, but who will be your friend during your whole life. And not those who will pick a fight to end the affair once their passion has abated, but those who will display their own goodness once your youth has faded. Please consider what I have said, and remember that lovers are often warned by their friends of the evil that can come from what they're doing. But no family member ever blamed those who are not lovers for that reason. You may wonder if I'm advising that equal favors should be granted to everyone who is not in love with you. A lover would not encourage you to gratify everyone who is in love with you, nor would it be reasonable to scatter your favors without discretion. Besides, it would certainly be difficult to keep such activities secret. No harm should come to either, and both should share the benefits. Now, I think I've said enough on this subject, but if you think anything is missing, or if you would like to hear something more, please ask. Socrates, what do you think of this speech?
Well, lead on, says Phaedrus. Tell me all. Okay. It says, yes, Socrates, the talk was very much of your sort. The topic that engaged us was, in a way, love. Lysias, you must know, has put in writing the attempted seduction of a handsome boy, but not by a lover of his. That was, in fact, what made it so ingenious. The point being that one should rather surrender to a non-lover than to a lover. And this is about lust versus love. Right? What else is strange about what he just said here? It says that the speech is about the attempted seduction of a handsome boy, but not by a lover of his. You read through this. Who do you think is Phaedrus' lover? Lysias. Right? I mean, Socrates is not his lover. Socrates and Phaedrus are clearly not lovers. Is that fair to say? I mean, does that seem like in the plot that, they don't seem that familiar with each other, like they've been doing the nasty. Right? At the same time, we see Socrates kind of seducing Phaedrus. Right? In some sense, he's trying to seduce him to philosophy. Point being this, the dialogue, the speech that Lysias gives is mimicked in the plot of this dialogue that we're reading right here. We are witnessing the seduction of a non-lover. Right? That Socrates is going to seduce the handsome young boy, Phaedrus. Phaedrus is a looker. Right? A handsome young man. He comes up in the symposium, right? He comes back up in the symposium, the handsome young boy. Right? And Socrates is the dirty old man. Phaedrus is the handsome young boy. They are not lovers, but they're going to engage in this very open flirtation. And Socrates is going to literally seduce him. They're going to change. He's going to move him to the other side. He moves Lysias to the side of philosophy. By the end of the speech, Phaedrus says, "Yeah, Lysias was wrong. You're right, Socrates. He's been seduced away from his lover. He's gone to the non-lover. He's proved Lysias' speech." You with me? All right. We're barely into this thing. You're going to hear this again over and over, because this dialogue constantly sort of repeats itself in everything it does. Okay. Socrates says, "Well now, how splendid. Still, I wish he'd stated that I should rather be to a poor man than a rich one, to an oldster rather than a youngster, to say nothing of all my own characteristics and those of the run of us. Such a topic would really suit the city and help democracy." Is he serious? In what tone does he speak here? Right? This is Socratic irony. Right? This is the point at which, he says, that every non-lover should submit to a poor guy, to an old man, and say nothing of my own characteristics. That would help democracy. Does he mean that? Is he being sarcastic? Is he being ironic? In what sense does he mean it and not mean it?
I think it's kind of sarcastic, but at the same time, he's no real man. So I think he would really actually like for all these joys and troubles.
Absolutely. I mean, he seems a particularly licentious dude, right? I mean, he's very flirty with Phaedrus, and it's going to become rather explicit in a page, right? There's going to be, full frontal in one page. I hope you all caught, so to speak, right? This is going to be like NC-17 in 1 minute, right? Right when we get to page 5. Right? So here's Socrates all flirty, and he says, and it's very flirty what he says. I wish it was all me. I wish all the young boys came to me. That would really suit democracy. Imagine if you took Socrates at his word. If you only listened to what he said, then if you were like a philosopher and you wanted to say, I know what Socrates believes in. He believes, according to this, that to truly help democracy, right, all the young non-lovers should throw themselves at the poor, rich, the poor, ugly old men. Well, that's not what he means, is it? That means we can't take Socrates at his word. When can you take him at his word, and when can't you? Right? Clearly, he doesn't really mean this. This isn't at the core of Socratic philosophy. You've all read The Republic. You probably had to read it or read the Cliff Notes at some point. Is this the core of his political philosophy? The core of Socratic philosophy of the political world in the Republic, right? In his ideal world, there's a bunch of good-looking young men getting it on with a bunch of poor, old men. That's his democratic world. That's the universe that Socrates gives us. Is that right? Well, that's absurd, right? So that means there's something about how you read this, how we all read this, that we don't take it at its word. How bizarre is that? We're reading this dialogue. It means we can't just read it for what it says. We have to read it for how it says it. We have to read performatively. Otherwise, we'll end up in this absurd position. And I want to suggest that you can't just pick or choose where you decide to read it performatively. Right? That here he's being ironic, but here he's being serious. I'd say that you always need to tend to this performative. It's not that he's always being strictly ironic, but that this text operates in the space of irony. This text operates between Plato and Socrates, between the written word and the spoken word, between the spoken word that says never write me down, and the written word that actually says don't take anything written seriously, but just said that, wrote it down. It means you can't take it seriously. That's where this text operates, in this ironic space. It's neither Plato's nor Socrates, but it is the space between them. Right? This text fleshes out this elaborate tumbling acrobatics of the space between. So he continues. I'm so anxious to hear you out that even if you walk as far as Megara and follow Herodotus' prescription to go to her walls and back again, I'll not be left behind. How's that, dear fellow? Surely you don't suppose that what Lysias, the cleverest of modern writers, took a great deal of time to compose, I, the mere tyro, can reproduce in a manner worthy of the master? Far from it. Yet I just wish I could. I wish it more than to get me a fortune. Okay, is Phaedrus sincere? No. Right? So now we get two modes of speaking and not meaning what we say right next to each other. We get Socrates' and we get Phaedrus'. Both times, right, in these two passages, neither man says exactly what he means. Right? There's a performative component that undermines the words. Is that fair to say? And yet they're not the same. Is Phaedrus ironic? What is he? Yeah, he's false, right? He's a kind of false modesty. He's a bullshitter, right? It's clearly different. So what I want to argue is that this text, right from the get-go, makes an argument, makes a distinction between different ways of not saying what you mean. Right? That you can't simply say irony is speaking and not saying other than what you mean. That's not quite what irony is. Right? Because there's lots of ways to speak and not mean what you say, such as being an immodest bullshitter, right? Being phony, false modesty. Right? There's a difference between these two modes, right? And the difference between these two modes is that for Socrates, he effaces what he says because because it's impossible to ever commit to the sensual world completely, because there's an invisible world. You can't completely be a man of the body because you also have a soul. Right? For Lysias, his not meaning what he says folds back only into the sensual world. It's self-serving. Okay? He just wants, you'll see, he wants to whip out his speech, so to speak. Right? It's a satisfaction of his material conditions. So both men say other than what they mean, but we get two modes of doing it. Okay? And we'll see. We'll see the complicated role Phaedrus plays in this dialogue. Right? It's very, very complicated. Right? And I want you to occasionally look into the details like we're doing, and then step back and see the structure of this dialogue, because it's, again, exceedingly complicated. Right? And the role that Socrates plays, the role that Phaedrus plays, the relationship between what they say and what they do, is going to cast a kind of strange architecture. Right? And then there's the position we're in. Right? It's a rhetorically complicated text. Right? We're witnessing Phaedrus and Socrates. We are not just Phaedrus. One way to read this is that we're simply the students of Socrates. Plato wrote down, right? Plato watched Socrates and Phaedrus, and then he wrote it down, and he gave it to us so we could learn like Phaedrus at the feet of the master Socrates. That would be a misreading. That would be, or a bad reading, more like it. Right? But instead what we get is Plato, Socrates, and Phaedrus in a whole relationship between them, and then we're put in a very particular position vis-a-vis their dialogue. Okay? This is a very complicated rhetorical text. That's why I end with it, because now you guys should have the chops to begin to make sense of something this complex. All right, so then Socrates says, now, Phaedrus, if I don't know my Phaedrus, I've lost track of myself. He says that a couple times. I've lost track of myself. Well, in many ways, this is a text about authorship. Right? At the end of it, he's going to say, you can only be an author of spoken words, not of written words. You can only be the authority over what you say, not over what you write. And here's Socrates saying, if I don't know you, then I've lost track of myself. But he's going to continually, quite literally, lose track of himself. It happens repeatedly. Right? He's going along, and then all of a sudden words are coming out of his mouth that aren't his. And then he's going to give a totally different speech. He's going to keep moving these different ways in which he's constantly losing track of himself. Right? So the status of what it means to be the author of yourself is constantly going to sort of be at play in this text. Right? As other voices speak through him, in the very possibility of being on track with yourself. Such a strange notion. Right? Are you with me? Right. I just want to show you that every moment in this dialogue, Plato's a poet. This is a complicated text. Yeah, Chuck.
I think also another way that he loses track of himself at this point is that he's being led outside of his familiar routine, which is living inside the city. And so actually the text is topographically as well.
Very, very nice.
The text is a map of Socrates being led outside of his normal domain.
Very nice, right? Did y'all hear John? Right? That Socrates says in the beginning, he doesn't really ever leave the city. Phaedrus is literally leading him away, leading him astride, leading him, what's the word?
Outside of the city walls.
Right. Literally outside the city walls, leading him away from his normal path. Literally lost track of himself. Right? And we'll talk about why he leaves the city or not leaves the city. We'll talk about that. Right? Because it's